So in my last video, I talked about the history of Teyvat, and we also discussed whether all 4 main beings in those events were truly wrong or not. Today, you can take this as the continuation of that video where we theorize everything based on what we learned so far. I only have 2 theories for this video, but I'd say these theories are quite deep. Way deeper than usual, I'd say, and I think it'll pique your interest. Now, worth noting that this entire video is mostly theory, so it's best for you to take everything I say with a grain of salt. As always, don't forget to give this video a like and comment so the channel can be noticed by the algorithm. My name is Glitchxcity, and I make lore and commentary videos on the channel to keep you company. Before we continue, I just want to let you guys know that I am opening art commissions on Vgen. If you're interested in supporting this channel, click the link in the description or pinned comment and check my portfolio there if you're interested. Alright, now back to the video. Okay, so before we really continue, we need to have a serious talk. First of all, we don't talk about leaks here. I am very open to you guys that I do look at playable character leaks, but I don't know anything about the lore. Many of you commented about the next updates leaks in my last video, and while I appreciate some of you using a spoiler warning, please don't comment about them. These leaks are still subject to change, and a lot of us, including me, don't want to look at them. In my case, it ruins my thought process in making videos like this, so I would appreciate it if you don't mention them. Secondly, I hate to say this, and I just hope it doesn't feel like a personal attack to some of you. Please don't be offended towards other people's opinion. Some of you made essays in my videos, and I don't mind that. Whether it's agreeing, disagreeing, or making a new theory, I get comments like this all the time, and I still read and reply to them. It's fun to engage with you guys, and it helps me broaden my horizons, gain more ideas, and help me decide what to make next. Heck, some comments that I like are people that disagree with me. But of course, sometimes the discussions can stop being productive, especially if it starts becoming aggressive over a small disagreement, whether from the video itself or from other comments. Honestly, if we're talking about the lore side, I don't really care if you guys agree or disagree with my opinion, and like I said, I am very neutral towards all parties in this game. Everyone has their own point of view and goals, which is why I can't really give my final verdict yet. The only reason I can make more opinion towards PHANES is because they're the only entity we got the most lore on. Compared to Koitak, Sirdevoinen, and Nibelang, PHANES is far more mentioned in the game, and every time these 3 characters are mentioned, they're intertwined with PHANES anyway, so naturally, there's more to discuss. Besides, I already said at the end of my video that I know I will be proven wrong by the game eventually because MiHoYo's writing is not always black and white, and I don't really mind it. I'll just update the lore in future videos, and that's that. However, that's not really the point. The thing is, this kind of behavior is not productive, and it can be very exhausting for everyone involved. I mean, sure, it helps with the algorithm, and while it's okay to be passionate about lore, it's important to remember we are still discussing interpretations of a game, so there's no reason to be aggressive over different opinions. Everyone has their own opinion, and they're entitled to have theirs, just as you're entitled to have yours. You can't force your opinion towards others and say it as the truth, especially if you wrote something that is not entirely confirmed by the game either. For example, people say the Voyager is an abyss worm. But is she really? Many people believe she's an abyssal entity, and there are reasons for that interpretation. However, she was implied at Celestial Gift to almost die and awakened at the last minutes from the void, but we don't know if she was affected by the abyss or not. It was implied, but by the time this video was made, the lore hasn't explicitly confirmed it. That's the difference between an implication and a fact. An implication can support a theory, but it doesn't automatically make the theory true. That's why I always divide my sections or say something if what I'm telling you in that moment is not fully confirmed. If I'm citing evidence, I'll show the item's description, image, name, and where to get it so you can read it yourself and come to your own conclusions. If I don't have that, then I'll say this is heavy speculation. But seriously, if you're compelled to speak your opinion, that's fine. It helps me engage with the algorithm and create more video ideas as well. I don't mind reading them as long you're chill about it. It's just a game, it's not politics, it's not that deep, and don't take it seriously. If I am wrong, I can easily correct that in a pinned comment as long as you are being nice about it. Remember, we are here to have fun, so let's just cast aside the negativity and have fun, alright? Okay, with that lengthy disclaimer out of the way, let's start with our first theory. The very first thing I want to talk about when I made my video was the ideal of eternity. We talk about this in my Temple of Space video where Asmodee ascended the Temple of Arcadia and made it as a museum from different civilizations of different eras. The goal is to preserve objects or people that she took from the mortal world into constant eternity where no progress or revolution can be made, and the two Watchers of the Temple of Space are created in order to keep this rule intact. These people are also first stored into the apathic interval where they have to abandon all desire and attachments. This process can take years or even centuries, then soon they become the Iones. Because of this, the Iones are not eligible to obtain visions since they no longer have ambitions that can be acknowledged by the heavens. That's why when the Order broke apart and people from the Temple of Space were free to do whatever they want, Melanza went mad and desperately tried to keep everything in order by sending some of the evolving Iones back to the apathic interval, even though he himself is already freed from this order. Nihilita's boss drop description states that the Watchers are Asmodee's clumsy imitation of the angels. I already stated in the same video that Asmodee is likely one of the most loyal shades compared to the other three, and her temple might be her view of Phanes' grand plan in the first place. Constant eternity where no progress can be made. The similar statement was also stated in Celestial Gift's Goblet Piece, where Phanes wanted humans to stray from progress because it leads to the inevitable destruction. All of these are already explained in the same artifact set and from the last Luna 5's event quest where, according to Alice, the essence of the abyss are fates that will never come to pass, or in other words, the unchosen fate. With all of this explained, don't you find this so familiar? That's right, all of this goes back to A's view of eternity.
Only through eternity are you closest to the heavenly principles.
Now let's rewind to what happened in Inazuma's Archon quest. I won't sugarcoat it, the story's Act 3 was poorly written because we got so many things yet also not at the same time. Everything felt extremely rushed and we don't exactly know the reason why A had that ideal in the first place, other than progress leads to destruction as she saw during the Cataclysm. If anything, it kind of raises more questions than answers because why is eternity the closest to the heavenly principles? Well, now we know why, because even Asmodee has a similar point of view. Now, it's true, the Vision Hunt decree happens because of the Futui's plot to destabilize Inazuma and create a delusion factory. It has nothing to do with the recent lore, but A's reasons supporting the decree does. She knew what visions are. Visions were granted when humans have their ambitions acknowledged by the gods of Celestia, or in this case, Phanes and its four shades. She knew that ambitions represented in visions will lead to destruction anyway, hence why she supported the plan. Now this returns to one of the earliest lore bombs in the game, A's Vision voice line. This line is the root of why people still debate why Vision exists and who grants them. It's very suspicious because she cut herself when she was about to reveal the second requirement.
Really? So in all this time, no new electrovisions have appeared in the outside world? Well, what I can say on this topic is subject to certain constraints, but it is not by my will that visions are granted or denied. The key is people's desire, and well, there's another side to it too.
Based on what she said, this leads to one possible explanation. She is not allowed to reveal the sensitive details about visions. The same thing goes with Nahida, where she said in a more allegorical way instead of saying it directly, implying that visions were made to monitor humans.
The heavens grew eyes to behold the true beauty of the world below, but humans already have eyes to begin with. So, what is it they see when they look at the world not with their eyes, but their vision? You're very smart. Can you figure out what the answer is?
Similarly, she is unwilling to discuss it directly but still gave the traveler some hints anyway. Perhaps saying it directly will likely provoke PHANES. More vision stories were then revealed by Neuvillette where the 7 Archons, or more accurately, the 7 elemental authorities, were duty-bound to spare some of their power and grants them to humans so the heavens, PHANES and their shades, will gain something more abundant in return. With Nicole's vision story, it gets more interesting because it further confirms that statement but in a more deeper way. Just like A, she knew what visions are, and she probably knew more than the Archons does. She even goes as far as to let herself obtain a vision, which is interesting when you think about it despite knowing the inevitable ending that the story mentions. Another interesting thing is how the story mentions mankind will always need its gods. This is a fact that applies to angels too. To be ignored, to be no longer needed, is a fate that terrifies even the divine. In a sense, this could imply that PHANES is terrified of everyone to not need them anymore, or these ambitions will lead to destruction since it will invite the abyss. From what the story implies so far, this could be true, but let's take it in a more neutral way. So the popular opinion is that PHANES wants to protect humanity and Teyvat by creating a predestined, one singular fate. Those who obtain visions are basically people with great ambitions that can potentially exceed PHANES, and in our Sister Court's questline, it implied that those who obtain a vision sold their soul to Teyvat. That's true, because once you obtain a vision, you are being monitored by Celestia. But what if the reasoning behind that is deeper than that, because instead of controlling humans, they're managing them? Think of it like this. I don't think PHANES wanted humans to be completely controlled by them, and ever since the War of the Funerary Year, they realized even their own creations, whether humanity or angels, will deviate eventually. However, they have to keep the ideal eternity, that constant stillness, intact, otherwise the abyss will invade. This is why visions exist. There are a lot of ambitious people in Teyvat, but there are also those who are overly ambitious. Instead of just controlling or guiding them, monitoring is probably the best solution that PHANES had in mind. In a sense, this is still a form of guiding, and to say they are completely in control is not the correct statement either, because Neuvillette's vision story implies that PHANES were waiting for humans to complete their ambition after obtaining a vision, so they could receive something more abundant in return. They knew these humans will deviate from their ideal eternity, but in a way, they are using the vision system so humans will continue to have their ambition while remaining in the predestined fate. The journey may vary from person to person, but the ending is already predetermined, which is basically illusion of choice to some extent. The illusion of choice is a psychological and cognitive phenomenon where individuals believe they are making independent, meaningful decisions even though their options are strictly constrained, guided, or lead to the predetermined outcome. It gives a false sense of control. The biggest example is Fontaine's prophecy, where they did everything to prevent the prophecy from happening, but it still happens anyway. But even though the outcome remains the same, the process leading to that point still made a huge impact, which is the reason why I say it kinda illusion of choice. Still, we have no idea what inevitable ending that Nicole mentioned. It could be a good thing or a bad thing. Either way, A's words are a lot more accurate today than they were in 2021. That said, we still have no idea, and all of these are still unconfirmed. But considering Snezhnaya will release soon, I think we'll get that answer eventually. Snezhnaya has 3 sources of power: visions, delusions, stellar lichpin, and you can even count the face as well since they're using the power of the light realm as implied in a note you can find at Wings of Keris. Kinda ironic when you think about it, because the whole shtick of vision should have been explained in Inazuma, yet we barely got anything from that nation. Also, side tangent before we continue to the next point, I feel like Inazuma should have been released after Natlan than after Liyue, because the story they made back then would have been a lot more impactful now. It's a pity because the Song of Welkin Moon was introduced to fill in Genshin's loose ends from previous regions. We got most of the nation's plot holes filled, but Inazuma barely had anything, and it's more so connections that only lore players would notice since they're hidden in artifacts or character stories. However, that's just my hot take. I just hope they are planning something for Inazuma anyway, since they confirmed buffs for Yae, Miko, and Mizuki in one of their recent shorts. Maybe it means something, who knows? Especially since that short was framed around changes in fate, which is a good transition to move on to our next point. I do hope we'll get something for Inazuma eventually, considering it still has ties to Snesh Naya to some degree, but only time will tell. Before we continue, I just want to let you know that this video literally took a lot of time for me to research. It is one of those videos where I really tried to make something out of the only lore we have so far, especially this patch is quite dry after the Archon quest was concluded, but I did have a lot of fun making this video since I can return to previous lore and so that's what it actually meant. That said, I'd like to let you know that this video took a lot of time and effort to make, so naturally, I would appreciate it if you could hit the like and subscribe button so this channel gets boosted by the algorithm and it helps me in improving this channel. With that said, let's continue. Out of all shades, Asmodee is said to get the most spotlight right now because of the release of Temple of Space. However, she is not the most prominent shade in the Song of Welkin Moon because I believe Istaroth played the most role in this arc, which is weird because everything that she did are mostly off-screen. Regardless, let's dissect it together. Aside from her obvious appearance in Inazuma, she makes more appearances in Natlan where she was directly involved with our siblings' actions. Because our twin was away from Khaenri'ah at that time and headed to Not Cry, the Khaenri'ahns were unable to defend themselves since their princess was nowhere to be seen. This happened because Diridith, a Khaenri'ahn citizen at that time, saw the present traveler and told our twin about it, and the space and time for your Archon quest is the exact time where it all happened, where the transposed space and time that the twin created was secretly used by Istaroth to bring Diridith into the present. It is a very complex timeline paradox, and I already made a video talking about it, so you can watch that if you need the full context of that incident. Another appearance is in the Tenochtitlan questline where Fenty revealed that Istaroth allowed him to sweep Marijivaru's timeline away. While she was not directly involved in that affair, she permitted Fenty to avert the Marijivaru crisis. The more talked about topic is Hymns of the Far North, where her verse mentioned her to be remarkably connected to the moons, where she protected the 4 imprisoned moons. We had no idea why it was written for, considering Columbina was born centuries after the funerary year, and we kinda have that answered already since Kuvaki, or Columbina's body, was spread all across Not Cry during that war. As to why Istaroth is heavily involved with the moons, so far it remains unanswered. However, there is a closer connection to that point where Istaroth gave Zibai a moon wheel directly, making Zibai a moon envoy. The most recent Archon quest, Truth Amongst the Pages of Purana, revealed that Istaroth was low-key against the idea of Nahida burning the Irminsul. Even though Vernova and Nibirius weren't against it and just confirming to Nahida whether she wanted to do it or not, Istaroth reminded Nahida that Irminsul is the very tree that controls the fate of humanity, something that we already knew for a very long time now. The moment it got burnt, the flow of fate is not the same as it used to be. I can only imagine Barbeloth might struggle even more with her hydromancy, since it already began shifting the moment the Frost Moon returns to Tevat and Columbina becoming the Soul Moon Goddess. The recent character buff short's description also supports this as well, where Barbeloth reads some of the playable cast's fate are shifting, which is basically the reason why in gameplay they got buffed in the first place. Now this doesn't mean fate disappears. It is still there, but it creates even more possibilities than just having a predestined fate. Of course, this is not really a major lore reveal, but it's interesting that Hoyo chose to frame these buffs as changes in fate. For the longest time, I always wondered why Istaroth was never punished despite continuously helping humanity. If you watched my previous videos, I often came to a conclusion that she might have used a third party to circumvent that rule, like how Istaroth helped Makoto by giving her the seed for the secret Sakura, allowing Tsibai to block the Celestial Nail, and allowing Fenty to erase Marijivari. But if we look at it in a different way, it seems it was not really her helping humanity, but it's her maintaining that eternity and fate of Tevat, which of course benefits humanity. This could explain why Istaroth continuously helps humanity, but in reality, she wasn't helping them but rather maintaining the rules of Tevat. Let's just take a small example, which is Marijivari. Fenty told us that Marijivari's timeline is severely corrupted, which is why Istaroth allowed him to cut the place from the rest of Tevat's timeline. But while doing that, she was not directly involved, and even though she helped the Natlanese in that disaster, many of the Natlanese died and some were trapped inside the miniature Night Kingdom that Sanhach created. Until today, they are still suffering from blocking Bakunawa from escaping, and the previous Power Archons died during the process. Despite the great cost, the timeline remains stable thanks to the Natlanese becoming the defense line for Tevat, and while it helped humanity to live until this day, many died during that process. It kinda gives you a broader perspective, doesn't it? Let alone Rhindaughter, who created the Bakunawa, is fused with Tiberius and essentially became co-workers with the other shades now. This is the reason why I believe while Istaroth helped humanity, it's more so she is maintaining fate itself and not really humanity as a whole, which is different from Renova, who is directly helping humanity by creating the Night Kingdom. Remember, Bakunawa was created by using the power of the Abyss that even the Abyss Order could not understand. You can say it's Istaroth's greatest enemy because by lore, Bakunawa is the most inconsistent being so far since it appeared 500 years ago but already predates way longer than that. In other words, Bakunawa is unusual because it exists outside normal temporal consistency. Side tangent a bit, another thing to note is that Bakunawa takes from a Philippines mythology of the same name, and in that myth, Bakunawa is a moon devourer and is an enemy of Minokawa, the sun devourer. Minokawa is hinted to exist in the Lava Walker artifact set, where a phoenix flew around the scorching land of Marijivari before it was erased. Regardless, Bakunawa might be related to the moon since the name is taken from a moon devourer of Philippines mythology, and because Istaroth is remarkably related to the moon in some way, it could be the reason why she allowed Fenty to erase Marijivari. Now, take the last bit with an extra grain of salt because I only based it on real-life mythology, and like I said in my videos, never take real-life mythology or references as an absolute fact in Genshin's context just because they have similar names or stories. Right now, we are currently at the climax of Genshin's story, where according to the Song of Welkimun's event page, the world, no longer sheltered by eternity, marches forward to its final breath, yet from the ashes, the new moon arises, its ascent spinning the wheel of fate anew. Since Istaroth is the most involved shade with the moons compared to the other three, we might get more Istaroth lore in the future, especially how she seems the one to be involved in bestowing moon wheels to those who worship the goddesses. The question now is whether Istaroth can continue maintaining fate in the same way she always has. If Nahida is correct and fate now carries more possibilities than before, then even the ruler of time may be entering unfamiliar territory. Interestingly, there is a piece of lore evidence that is not talked about often, and that is the Lunar Arcanum 10, the Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune is taken from the 22 major arcana tarot cards of the same name. The card's meaning is basically the ultimate symbol of destiny, cycle, and unpredictable nature of life. It reminds you that change is the only constant, and that what goes up must eventually come down. In other words, we don't know what will happen in the future, but it will come to pass eventually. If you think about the context in Genshin, the card is kinda the opposite of that. In Lunar Arcanum, it says, "It is the sum of all that is destined to happen and all that never will." When we think about fate, it's usually associated with an already predestined path or future. This concept is used quite often in a lot of different media, and it's included in Genshin Impact as well. It is the reason why the main theme of Genshin Impact is to defy fate, and because Istaroth is the shade that is strongly associated with this concept, it's no surprise why she appears in a lot of major events of Tevat, because she is simply maintaining fate of the world. Now, I also want to mention why Istaroth's behavior is quite peculiar. So according to Venti, Istaroth treats everything equally, whether in their value and insignificance. She is also shown to be always disinterested in anything and even late during the occasional meeting between the shades in the God's Limits trailer. Quite an interesting behavior considering it's the exact opposite in the Lunar Arcanum where he's shown to have cried. So why is that? Now let's take this in a more relaxed and very different approach. Frankly, when doing this, I am stumped, and a bit of life advice here. It's okay to take a break if you're overwhelmed and have no inspiration coming to your brain. Sometimes, random things you do while relaxing can be an answer to your problem, which is something that happened to me while I'm writing the script. Just know that I am not making a connection between games that are not related whatsoever, but I want you to know that this concept is very common in games, and this is exactly what happened when I played another game called Seven Knights Rebirth. Not sponsored, but man, I wish I am. If you played this game, there is a character named Skuld, who is an overseer of fate. Basically, you can refer to her as Barbeloth of Seven Knights. Yes, I awakened this girl, and you know that awakening in this game is expensive. But she's cute, so I don't mind it. Anyway, the point is what she said. You get an option to ask her if fate can be changed, and while TLDR she said fate can't be changed, the explanation she gave is interesting.
The death of a close friend. The death of comrades in arms who fought by your side. The death of poor innocent youths who were senselessly trampled by the horses of war. Asking if there are certain destinies I'd want to change is like asking me if all of these deaths and more didn't matter. Why? Because it makes it seem like I knew their fates, but I let them die anyway. Honestly, to go even further, it's also like accusing me of being so heartless that I turned a blind eye to these innocent deaths.
That goes very deep, doesn't it? Like I said, this concept is not new, and something similar is mentioned by Mona in the second Golden Apple Archipelago event. This take gives me an idea that maybe it's better if I can write this theory based on how Istaroth felt and why she is acting the way she is. Now back to Genshin Impact. I think what Skuld says here is something that Istaroth also feel, except she is so used to this feeling that she became bored. Just because the Shades are essentially the embodiment of rules doesn't mean they don't have compassion for humanity either. We see this plenty of times where the Shades, except Asmodee at least, also felt pity for humanity. Renova being the biggest example because she overstepped her authority but still does it anyway. Istaroth knew what is going to happen in the future of humans in Teyvat. According to Venti in Tenochtitlan Event Quest, Istaroth wrote the story of Teyvat and she engraved within her memory of all people, all events, all encounters, and all farewells. Whether that's a figure of speech or not, the point remains. Istaroth already knew the outcome of everything in Teyvat. Returning to the Lunar Arcanum again, this explains why Istaroth is crying. She knows what is going to happen, she is powerless to change fate, and while her interference is very likely to maintain fate, it could also come from the genuinity of her heart that she wanted to directly aid humans in the first place. Since Istaroth is not a descender, this means she can't control fate and her duty as the embodiment of rules remains. If you think about it, it's really sad, isn't it? She knows how everything ends, yet even if she wanted to change them, she couldn't. All she can do is maintain everything, and she is so numb to these tragedies that she becomes bored. But now that Irminsul is burnt, and not to mention, Columbina is now born, this makes me wonder if Istaroth can now do her duty with a different approach. Fate is still there, but it's no longer something that she is used to. Instead of everything within a single line of predestined fate, perhaps Istaroth's way of maintaining fate is much more different now. The world, no longer sheltered by eternity, marches forward to its final breath. Yet from the ashes, the new moon arises, its ascent spinning the wheel of fate anew. Somehow, with the new lore we have so far, this makes me wonder if the line from the hymns of the far north holds even deeper meaning. May you protect the 4 imprisoned moons, may you protect the 4 imprisoned moons. You are the one outsider in the sacred courtyard of the gods, the one stillness within the endless flow. O Supreme Mother, who in the moment of your birth also gave birth to yourself, you remember all and allow them to be forgotten. You create all and destroy all. For now, we can leave it at that, as I believe we might get more answers within the next update. I hope so. And that's the video for today. Overall, I had a lot of fun making this video since most of the content here are things I rediscovered and made me have a lot of thoughts to ponder on. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed today's video and I'll see you on the next one. Jana!